So feel free to have your video off, and I'll hand over to Martin and Jacob to start us off.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for having us. If you don't mind, I'll just spend a couple of minutes just sort of setting the scene around why we're doing this. And then Jacob will also come in and sort of set the scene around some of the public service reform work that's going on, that this forms a smaller part of. So this has come about very much as the reunification of the probation services. That's meant that there's an opportunity to recommission the support for our whole system approach for vulnerable and marginalised women. First thing I'll say about saying vulnerable and marginalised women, I recognise very many women that actually use the services do not see themselves as vulnerable or marginalised. They see themselves as strong, surviving, coping, getting by, all those things. So please, it was the best name I could come up with on the day, and so it's my apologies for not having anything better than that. But there's the opportunity for this system to be recommissioned, and that's why the scope of this work is around those women that are at risk of coming into contact with the criminal justice system, either as a victim or as an offender. Our traditional focus was around the offender aspect of that, but we realised very quickly that the vast majority of women that end up in the criminal justice system are victims as well, and often victims of a lot worse situations and offences than they commit themselves. And then also the very many victims in our communities also have a whole load of need that is sometimes unmet, and so the opportunity to access a women's centre we thought may be a good opportunity to begin to get those women in touch with some of the wider services. So that's the scope of it, and it's around those areas specifically, and that's because the new National Probation Service will be a key co-funder of this work. What we're doing is we're recommissioning something that has been nationally recognised as successful. It is, believe it or not, most major cities or urban conurbations look to Greater Manchester and think, crikey, how do we get as far ahead as you've managed to get already? But we did that through engaging with 8 local providers who became the Greater Manchester Women's Support Alliance. They're independent organisations that became that as we worked together over the last 7 years. And they're now at a stage where they're trying to push ahead a little bit further themselves. So we have a very good relationship with those voluntary sector providers, and in turn they have a very strong relationship with the women that use those women's centres. But today very much is about the opportunity for ourselves to hear directly from yourselves about what you think would make what you think would make a difference in a women's centre, what works, so we make sure that in the recommissioning we keep the elements that work, any bits that you think that could remove barriers, would be really keen to hear about, to access to that, and bits that you think that haven't worked as well for you as well, some of the issues and the problems. Though I'm very pleased to say that we're as seen as a bit of a pathfinder and at the forefront of this, we absolutely know that this isn't cracked at all, and that there are very many vulnerable and marginalised women that need some further support across Greater Manchester. And for the limited amount of funding, unfortunately, this isn't going to be able to do everything in any case, but whatever we do, we would like to make sure we get it right. And so that's why I'm really keen. I must thank Michaela and everybody else that's contributed for your comments so far. And this is, we're really looking forward to hearing from you very much before we go into the breakouts. So that's it from me, if that's all right.
Yeah.
And it's over to Jacob, if that's okay with you, Michaela.
Yeah, fire away, Jacob.
Hi everyone, I'm Jacob Botham. I'm from the Public Service Reform team in the Combined Authority. I don't think there's too much to add to what Martin said, apart from, I suppose, just reiterating what improvement and transformation of public services is, and we're constantly striving to obviously ensure that services are meeting the needs of people who use them. But you know, you don't have to be a genius to work out that critical to that is that we actually listen to what people actually want and need, and we're able to build relationships with people who have experience of using the services or work with people who use services to build up a picture of what's really needed. And sort of central to that is the way that we approach the commissioning process. So when we've got an opportunity to commission a new set of services or put a new contract in place, for me there's two really important parts to it. One is making sure that we are able to capture the insights and the experiences as we're going through and designing what we want the service offer to look like. So this session today is absolutely about that, and giving a voice, you know, to a full range of people who might use those services. And Martin summed it up well, actually. It's not all about the good stuff. It's like what's not worked. That's just as important. And then the second part of it for me is about, you know, once we've got an agreement in place with organisations to deliver a contract, or we've got provision in place, that we continue to invest our time and resources in ensuring that, you know, we have some challenge and support from those people who are using the services. And so we're keen to obviously hear about people's experience today, what they think it should look like. You know, as always, there's not a big endless pot of money, so we need to be really clear around what this offer needs to be and what it can't be, but also keen to understand more from you about how does it work once things are up and running. So this isn't just about the design, but what's needed in the background to provide some check and balance to the way that the service is delivered. So really great there's so many people on the call today, and I can see that we really sort of tapped into a wide range of people and networks, which is exactly what we'd hope, really. So yeah, that's all I was going to say. You know, like I say, important part of the process this for me, and but it's not the end of the process either, would be my main message.
Thanks, Jacob. That's great, and set a bit of a tone there. I'm sorry we've not got a Q&A slot currently, but we are going into breakouts in the second half of the event. So there's time for questions, conversations, reflections. We can have our heated debates then. So for anyone that doesn't know, my name's Michaela Torkington, and my internet does go iffy, so apologies. I'm one of the co-founding directors of Flourish Together, and we've got a number of members of the team here today who are going to be in breakouts and be around and about. I just wanted to thank my colleague Joe McGrath, who's analysed the survey with me, and will add some points in later. We've also got Rana Kadiri, another director at Flourish, who's supporting the event. We've had Simone Callahan from the Goodness Collective, based over in Stockport, who's been a great support in a number of focus groups. We've also had a couple of other people, a lady called Jo Andrew, who's going to be speaking shortly as part of our group of 9 women with lived experience who are sharing thoughts. Jo and our Time to Grow programme has also helped as part of focus groups and capturing information and interviews, as has Jennifer Irvine, a lady who's an intern with us, a recent graduate in social anthropology. So we thought we'd give her a baptism of fire in being part of this piece of research. So thanks to the team. It's been no mean feat pulling some of this around. And I just was going to give a quick summary. A lot of you know that we have carried out a range of focus groups, a number of interviews, and a survey have formed the basis of how we've gone about this sort of initial part of the consultation. And basically, in the last month and a half, there's been a whole range of conversations taking place, and we're trying to pull together some of the findings of that, some of the headlines really today, so that when we get into breakouts later, we can start to sort of reflect on that, but really get into starting some progress. I couldn't put everybody's logo on here. There's been over 80 organisations who've been involved in conversations, interviews, and cascading the survey out to people. So we've had all sorts of agencies and the women who they support involved in what we've done in the last few weeks. So a bit of a jigsaw of logos for you there, but one of the great sort of outcomes of this, irrespective, of the consultation, is there will hopefully be additional connectivity between the amazing services that are out there that support women, both those that are directly impacted by the criminal justice system, but also those who are at risk of or are part of the wider community of Greater Manchester where women are needing support. So I'm going to move quickly on so that we can spend a good amount of time hearing from some women with lived experience. We basically ran a number of focus groups and a number of interviews, and many of you that are here today have been part of. And on sort of Martin's advice, we've invited a number of people who were perhaps women with lived experience. They might be running some smaller organisations, but in the main, they're coming from their own sort of individual perspective to share a range of sort of diverse insights, really, so that we can all see the complexity and the broad range of needs out there, and their sort of thoughts, views and recommendations. So what I've asked people to do is say a bit about themselves and why they're passionate about women with lived experience having a voice and sharing their views. They're going to also, where they have run a focus group or where they've got other thoughts and insights and observations, be sharing those. And I've asked them all to have their one big ask. So be prepared, commissioners. You might have some big asks here, but we're better off knowing what the asks are, and at least we can be aware of the range of needs across the spectrum. So Joe, can I invite you up first, bite the bullet, be the first one to... I can hear you all right there.
I'm going to stay off. If that's all right. I'm sorry.
Go for it. No, and try not to be nervous. No, yes, we can hear you.
Hi everyone, I'm Joanne Andrew. I've been part of the Time to Grow programme with Nicola. I was introduced to there through another friend to give me an opportunity to get back on a path to moving forward, really. I've been stuck for a number of years going through a personal lived experience.
And have you got a big ask from yourself, or is there any key ask for the commissioners, I guess, to sort of sum up?
Therapists who work with clients who have experienced trauma, it should be mandatory that they have completed trauma-informed therapy. You just end up going round in circles otherwise. Plastering over the cracks, dealing with surface difficulties without working with the underlying issues doesn't solve any problems. Medication is often prescribed initially prior to any interactive support. Often it can feel like there is a power hierarchy between the professional and the person accessing the services. My son's been on quarantine and I feel like I've not finished off my piece properly, but my one recommendation that I have come up with for now is there needs to be more inclusion of experts by lived experience in the processes and structures of service models. They need to be included in the key business areas of service, be included in business making decisions, and be in attendance at senior meetings. We were the first, in the programme I worked with through the Department of Health, our programme were the first programme to involve service user involvement. It was very successful. The programme was researched and there's research to back up the involvement of having service users involved in programme business.
Absolutely, Joe. And I think what you're saying there really sets things off well. So I was just going to say thanks for your sort of honest sort of account of some of what's happened for you there. We really appreciate having your sort of knowledge and experience within our focus groups to help tease out and ask some pertinent questions. And I think the key ask that you asked there is highly sort of appropriate for today's thinking and conversation. So we look forward to having you in breakouts a bit later on to continue that conversation, Joe. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, I'm being a soft touch with Joe, but I'm going to be brutal with everyone else because we've got quite a few people who are going to chat, and I'm being a soft touch with Joe because, you know, clearly she's got a lived experience there that can tell the story that, you know, we've heard a lot of similarities with what Joe's had to say across numerous interviews, conversations and focus groups that I've been having. So that's really helped set one story and one example amongst many. So thanks, Joe. Selena, I know you've got to hit the road shortly, so would you like to just come and say a few words, about 5 minutes, just a bit about yourself, what you've been doing, and your key asks for commissioners, please?
Yeah, so firstly, thank you, Joe. Like Joe, I'm just going to turn off my camera because, like Joe, I'm super nervous, so, and this will make it easier for me. So I'm a person of lived experience of homelessness, and from my experience of hostels and B&Bs, I witnessed, you know, women of my age that had been reoccurring through the system, and I kind of thought, like, why is this okay for these women, and for me this is hopefully going to be a once experience. And I did a bit of research, and the more research I did, the more I found that some of those women have been through the care system, and I did some more research and I found some more women that had been through the care system, young girls between the ages of 16 to 18. And what happens with these young girls is that basically they leave the care system, end up getting pregnant within the first 10 to 18 months, and within the first 5 years, most of them, their children will end up in care. And then what happens to these young girls is that they're kind of left then to fend for themselves, like, you've done really, really bad. I mean, and anybody on this call who's got kids will know there's no handbook, so you don't actually know what you don't know anyway. So they're then left, and, you know, 9 times out of 10 they'll meet someone and they'll end up getting pregnant again, and before you know it, it's a reoccurring cycle. And you could have a 16-year-old who by the time she's 21 ends up with 4 children. So from that, I created Benevolent Life Change, and it was an organisation that would firstly take people on holiday and then educate them, then house them and do all of that stuff. And through having conversations with Nicola, it ended up being an alternative education house. And how that would work is it's all down to them. It's not me, it's not my idea of what a holiday is. So we have maths economics, which is my house project. So when you first, not all people, but when I moved into my flat, it was a shell. And for me as an adult, that's okay because I like, you know, rooting around charity shops. For a 16, 18-year-old, that's not okay, because what happens is that's not home for them. And then they find alternative ways to fill that home. So the My House project helps them to look at what they want, you know, what they feel they need to create a home. And if it's a 10 grand house, then 10 grand television, then that's okay because they're going to pay for it. But how are you going to pay for it? So the end game is always to look at getting them into employment, but understanding the why, because some of these guys don't understand why you want to go to work, why you why you go to work when your boss has pissed you off. So it's understanding, getting them to understand their why. And then English is personal development and timeline therapy. I did some timeline therapy, and I think it's important to understand who you are and where you come from, because that will help with the healing process. And then home economics is come down with me. And how it works is that every single month, each person will cook a meal over a course of a week. And you know, for anybody who's seen Come Down With Me, you'll know that it's all about sat around the table, and it's about giving and receiving feedback, because I'm 42 now, and it was 38 when I learned how important feedback is. And some of these guys are going to be getting negative feedback all the time. So it's all about sat around a table, and most conflict management happens around the table. So it's about learning feedback, giving and receiving, and understanding conflict management around the table. And geography is my my holiday project. So initially I was saying that everybody needs to go and have a cruise around the world because you get to see all these wonderful places, but actually it's not about what I want, and I was then taking the experience away from them. So I created my holiday project, and how that works is it starts from the beginning. So where do you get your passport from? Where do you get that from? Right, okay, let's get a passport. Where do you want to go? Where do you, and you know, all of that stuff that everybody goes through, those experiences and those emotions that everybody goes through when they're going to book a holiday. Where should we go? Looking at that, looking at different countries, what their experiences are. And at the end of it, you put it all into a hat and pick one, and that's where everybody goes. But they've been on that journey and felt those experiences, and it's all creating whys. Why would you go to work? And the history project is about history of self, because everybody's got a history. Manchester's got a massive history. Every single borough has a history, and all of these young women are going to come from a place, and they need to know where they came from. And if there's one thing Black Lives Matter has shown me, you have to know what your history is. And then arts is art therapy, and PE is couch to 5K, and they get to donate to any charity they want. It doesn't have to be Benevolent Life Change. And it does seem really, really out there, but actually, like Joe said, you know, there's loads of, and I'm not, you know, knocking anybody else's services, but there's loads of things that are not working, and this has the potential to work. So my ask to the commissioners is to think about it, and if you can make the difference, make the difference. Thank you.
Thanks, Selena. And I think, you know, you've through your own experiences and through thinking through ways that you can make a difference, building life skills in other people to help them break cycles of you know, remaining in poverty, coming into contact with the criminal justice system, you know, having you know, awful circumstances that happen. You know, you talk a lot there about young women in care. We're going to come back to that theme before the end a little bit later on, but I'd love to ask Louise Waddington from Make a Pathway to come and say a little bit. We ran a focus group. One of the things I saw when I was reading the sort of background information to what we're doing is there's a real gap, I feel personally, around understanding the needs of young women and what the next generation expect and need from support, women's centres and everything else. So Louise, it'd be great to hear from you, your thoughts, your insights and your ask, please. If you're there, if you can come off mute and I'll get you on. Are you still with us, Louise?
I'm here.
There you are. Perfect. Fire away. We can hear you now. Go for it.
Okay, so I just want to say say everything Selena and Joe have just spoken about has been so powerful, and I think that shows the lived experience really, you know, hits home and actually is a positive thing. And I think for me, I've never shared my lived experience, but that's what's drove me forward with everything that I've done with my organisation. But sharing it is very powerful. So I set up Make a Pathway about 6.5 years ago, and we have designed a lot of bespoke and tailored interventions for young people as and when the issues arise. And we've designed, like Selena, a lot of programs and projects that, you know, have some amazing outcomes. So I think what my ask would be is, like you said, Nicola, to listen to young people's voice and actually listen to young adults, young people, and put their wants into your offer. I'm getting a bit flustered now.
No, you're fine. I was going to ask Louise. I mean, obviously, you've done a lot of work with young people. What are some of the things that you've observed, I guess, we interviewed a number of young people when we had our focus group, and we also invited Emma from Calm Connections in, who has a lot of lived experience with young people and parents and their needs. But you know, what are some of the young people facing on a day-to-day basis, and how have, you know, I know for a fact that the work that you've done has tried to and definitely kept young people out of the criminal justice system, but what some of their needs? What
I think the needs are so big. It's some families are facing so many difficulties that there needs to be like one person, like Joe was saying, you're passed from pillar to post and person to person, and you're expected to share your stories with that new person every time. And that's really difficult for young people. Any, you know, young adult, any adult, it's very difficult to share your story with somebody new all the time. So to build up that relationship is really key for the young person, young adult, to be able to share and move forwards. So I think,
trust.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that came out, and it will come back later in the summary, it was around, and it's Joe said a similar thing, and the young people we spoke to with yourself and Emma Lenihan at Calm Connections was talking about how people get talked about and how people get reported on, and a lack of transparency and a lack of involvement in how communications take place. So we'll come back to that point perhaps a little later on, but I know that was a key element of what we discussed as well, around creating the right systems or building on good practice systems where how social workers, people in the criminal justice system, schools, parents, carers, and or individuals themselves are able to both put information into a system, so you've not got to keep saying the same thing every year, like Joe talked about with teachers, or likewise with others. So
and that was my first ask that I scribbled down was, you know, to find a way to structure the data to recognise the real changes happening, and then we can, you know, re those models so they can become bigger and stronger. It's actually finding how we collect the data, because we have to collect so much different data, and have a new system to collect the working data to move forwards.
Fab. Yeah, certainly data and how it's communicated with case notes and case information is one thing, and having the right levels of investment and support and capacity to measure the outcomes in an appropriate way, like you're just saying, is something that's come up in numerous focus groups, particular focus group that we had with the Pankhurst Centre and a number of people from Women's Aid and other organisations that Gail Heath brought to the table there. So that was another one. I'm going to move swiftly on to Tina. Sorry, keeping you waiting there, people. So Tina, we had a really insightful focus group. I invited Tina to share a bit about the sort of LGBT community, and you know, as a sort of hidden community, or not really. We had people from different walks of life telling us about their kind of challenges, barriers and needs. So Tina, do you want to say a little bit more? Yeah,
sure. Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Tina from Forward. We're a brand new LGBT plus support organisation based in Stockport, set up just before the lockdown. So kind of building things up from scratch. Excuse me. The aim is to improve the well-being of the LGBTQ community using the 5 ways to well-being. So currently we have a helpline that runs Monday to Friday 9 to 5, and it's for kind of validation, social contact, emergency food. We've also just started running socials, virtual socials. Every other Friday we do a trans one. Every other Thursday we do an LGBT plus one. We have like wellbeing, active wellness, you know, mindfulness, and done a cook along and that sort of thing. So yeah, we had a really small but perfectly formed focus group a couple of weeks ago. We had I think a couple of bisexual ladies, a couple of lesbians, and my wonderful girlfriend who's a trans woman, all sharing experiences. So I'm just going to kind of try and, I've sort of done a précis of it, so I'll just go through it and then got my big ask at the end. So 2 of the ladies disclosed about assault, and they said that GPs need to have a much better understanding of how to respond in the first instance, and where to signpost to. They didn't seem to know what the next steps were or what the long-term care available is. And these are all sort of in the Stockport area. Both of them recognised how lucky they were, how fortunate they were, that the nature of their employment meant that they had access to counselling, kind of crisis counselling. And obviously that's not the case for everyone. They just happen to be lucky that was their jobs. Excuse me. One of them said that St Mary's Hospital had a really good crisis counselling service. Some points came up about language that was used when reporting assault. So there's words like rape, assault, abuse, disabled, victim are quite loaded and quite difficult to say out loud sometimes. And also a lot of people look at those words and those situations as being very taboo and, either kind of shame with bringing those subjects up or kind of not wanting to cause offence. Also, the word feminist for some people has quite negative connotations, given that some feminists are kind of this gender critical. We'll go on to talk about that in a minute. So it may lead to fear for women to approach services that kind of say, we're feminist. Methods of reporting, being on the phone is not always, the best way to do it. People aren't always able to verbalise what happened or what's going on. So, a text or email or some kind of code would be kind of preferred way to report. As for LGBT plus issues, I don't know if people know, there's Pride in Practice, which is the LGBT Foundation's sort of project to improving access to primary care services for LGBT people. So they go and they train GP receptionists and the staff, and they sort of get awarded. So the idea is, it was mentioned that a lot of other services need to have this kind of standard of understanding of LGBT plus issues, especially for trans people. With regard to smears, there's a lot of kind of, and I've had this myself, nurses kind of skirting around the issue of, you're lesbian, or thinking that you don't need a smear because you don't have penetrative sex, and it's it's just kind of having this understanding, and also understanding that trans women don't need a smear, but some trans men do, and likewise with a prostate exam, trans women will need a prostate exam.
There are definitely some, specific specialisms that come up around your community that may or may not be fully understood or fully talked about. I'm conscious of time, Tina, so I'm really
sure
going to have to ask what your big ask is. Rest assured that a lot of what we discussed in our focus group there will be feeding through into the reports. So nothing's going to get
I'll send you my notes as well. I think our big ask is around education, especially kind of sex education and relationship, more importantly, relationship education in schools. It's just totally lacking. But yeah, our huge ask is for services, for investment in conversations around gender, especially transgender people at the moment. There's an awful war going on social media, and we just need to have spaces to have these conversations in a respectful manner, because there's, it's kind of like two sides in a war and no one's listening, and there's really valid fears on both sides of that. So yeah, we need to have a lot more of these conversations that are calm and rational and lead somewhere.
Thanks, Tina. No, I know we talked towards the end of our focus group around, having more sort of bold and courageous and compassionate conversations. So thank you very much for that. Fran, come and join us if you're there. And again, Fran convened a conversation with us with women with former convictions. Obviously a big part of what we've been looking into and discussing has been around women who come into contact with the criminal justice system, be it as victims or as perpetrators. And as much as we've had interviews with women in prisons and women on probation, it was great to have Fran co-host that conversation. So if you're there, Fran, do you want to come off mute and tell us a bit about what you've been doing, a bit about what we discussed and your big ask, please?
Yes. Okay, so I'm Fran, better known as the Barker Baker. The Barker Baker was a social business that I set up whilst serving a suspended sentence, attending probation meetings, drug rehabilitation, counselling meetings. In terms of ticking the boxes, I most certainly did do that. The one thing I learned whilst going through sort of my first time offender journey was that whilst I did tick the boxes, there wasn't any particular depth, follow up or follow through, I suppose, from any of those services. My huge focus, and that was a huge topic of conversation in our focus group, was rape crisis and the lack of consistency, the wait times, the geographic issues that if you moved out of area, you reset the clock, you're back on the waiting list. And it's interesting, actually, that having kind of brought some like minds together, other ex-offenders, we all were kind of the same mindset that actually as an ex-offender, you very often don't see yourself as the victim, but 9 times out of 10, we are looking at things like childhood trauma, going through the care system, homelessness, prostitution, all of these things that just essentially lead us down the wrong path. So prevention, definitely, we do need some serious investment in better engagement services that can kind of reset, some seriously good counselling. The focus has to be on mental health, drug rehabilitation, most definitely. But if I'm going to keep it short and sweet, really, the main thing for me as the Barker Baker, the premise was to hire people with ex-offenders who were scared of getting into an employment, for having to disclose their criminal convictions, and found that a huge barrier in terms of getting back into society. So if we can address, most definitely, getting people back into employment and avoiding this taboo and this sort of black mark, which is the disclosure issue that has to take place these days, then that would be a wonderful thing to destigmatize being an offender in any way, shape or form, most definitely. And I think the only way we can do that is very much so what Joe said at the beginning, is having people with lived experience leading these sorts of initiatives and leading by example. That was always my best intention when setting up the Barker Baker, hiring ex-offenders, people with mental health issues and things like that, was to lead by example. Probably not the wisest decision I've ever made, given that I can see the pitfalls in the system and fell through the cracks myself. But it puts me in a really strong position to be able to share these experiences with you guys and see where the glaring issues are. So geographically, the takeaways are, don't reset the clock just because someone moves out of area, because 9 times out of 10, someone with mental health issues is not going to re-engage when they're forced to kind of go through that process again of having to say, okay, well, I told this to this lady last week, but sure, I'll tell it to you. Yes, data collection, the kind of the sensitivity of passing over that information, most definitely. It's very much what the ladies have said, you know, Louise and Joe, they hit the nail on the head. Consistency, timelines, delicate management of delicate people, victims, perpetrators, however you want to see it. The main intention is that we all end up in the same place, which is working together. So that's my takeaway.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fran. Really appreciate that. And I think it's making me think about one of the interviews that I did with a woman who has sort of recently left prison. And, you know, she'd said, you know, for her, the night that she left prison, there was nowhere for her to go. Her probation officer, when she went to them, had not arranged something and said, I've not had time. And have you got somewhere you can stay? And after 5 years in prison, with a whole complicated set of circumstances, and feeling very anxious, you know, she thank goodness she managed to sort herself out. But she said, you know, if I'd been a drug taker, or if this, that and the other, if there were certain other circumstances, she'd have been straight back inside very, very, very quickly. And, you know, housing was the big thing for her. And that, you know, when the housing system and the housing lists are set up in such a way where there's oodles of women in difficult, insecure housing situations, and those people coming out of prison are some of the most vulnerable and some at the bottom of the pile. There's a big mismatch there, and a big challenge, not necessarily for the criminal justice and this particular fund to fix, but to be collaborative partners around. So thank you for sharing that, Fran. And
you're welcome.
Without further ado, I'm going to invite Jasmine, if I may. Jasmine kindly hosted a conversation which had much more women from Black, Asian and other diverse communities involved. And I'm pleased to say, out of the work that we've done, over 42 women out of 122 that we've had in focus groups have been from Black, Asian and other sort of ethnic backgrounds. So Jasmine, do you want to come and just say a bit about yourself and your sort of key asks for the commissioners?
Hello everyone.
Here we go.
My name is Jasmine. I'm a founder of Women with Wings, which is a group that supports BEM women to improve their lives and their family lives. I came involved with this focus group only because I've got the women that I'm supporting them, and as well as I'm a living experience lady. So I will go in both in quickly. Yeah, what we got from the women that I'm engaging with is a lot of lack of lack of women services out there that they can go and get some help. So many women, they just come to my organization to ask for help that I don't know about it. I haven't done that job before. So I have to find a way to signposting them to go to those organizations that they're gonna get help. When you come back to my living experience, about 8 months ago, I end up in a situation that I need support, and I quickly, to my knowledge that I know, I quickly ran to the police, and it was a waste of my time. I didn't get any help, and it really put me down to the situation that I say, this is it, I have to live in this situation, because there's no, that is a bigger place that I can think of, or if they don't know, they should even tell me where to go, but I didn't get that. So came back, but deep down, I know that I need help. I need help. I couldn't live in that situation. So I start asking people, talking to people, and asking the question. Then I got to the this organization called CIDAS that were brilliant. And my housing association is for housing. They were also really supportive during all that time to check on my well-being and my kids' well-being, and direct me to the places that I can get some more help and support. So with these CIDAS, they came along, and they could do much, but then we go back to the police, where then the police listened to me and helped me, but with the back of the of this organization. So with all the key points that I gather for myself and for the lady that we support them is many of these services, they go like by the book. So if you go with your problem, and then they'll start checking, okay, we have to start asking number 1, number 2, number 3, but other people, they just go over there. They've already passed number 1, 3, 4, they are number 6. So when you ask them, when you take them back to number 1, they just think that you are wasting their time. So they just disconnected with that support, and they think that you can help me. So that's come to the bigger ask is for this organization to know exactly to support individual according to their situation. When they come, listen to them, and then know where I should start supporting them. Not just starting because I have to ask, where do you live? Then they start from there, because other people, they just think that, okay, I don't think if you're gonna help me, and then they disconnected, and they go more back in a situation rather than get some help from you. So that's a big ask. The next ask is to invest more in these women's services and educated them more, especially to the BEM community. We've got less people in the BEM community that they can do this work. And with the BEM women, they are more likely to open up with the other people. And this is not because of anything, it's just because the way they've been raised, is like you have to keep things by yourself. You have to sort it out by yourself. Nobody outside. So for them to open up is quite challenging. But then if you don't know all these, you will come to the full room, you stay for a couple of hours, 10 hours, but they won't open up to you. They will say, we are fine, we are fine. But if you know where they're coming from, you know exactly they are not fine, then you keep pushing it for them to open up. So I think that is my ask, to invest in the BAME community, women's services, so they can help these women, because there's a lot and they are going through hell. But then when you see them outside, they're just quite fine. They look fine, but they're in a deep
Putting a brave face over things, Jasmine, as we often all can do, but certainly through lots of conversations that we've had with individuals, with agencies, and with academics, actually, getting much better cultural awareness, people with lived experience from diverse communities, and also recognising the diversity across our sort of diverse communities. So, you know, recognising that, you know, the needs of migrant women are different from the needs of perhaps British born women, and, you know, language barriers or not language barriers, and, you know, nuances to communities are a key factor in trying to seek to better understand and better support and prevent and help people at a time of crisis has certainly come across. And we're on the homeward stretch now before we share some survey findings and get into breakouts. But without further ado, I would love to invite Sumera to come and say a little bit. Sumera came on one of our mentorathons a couple of years ago, and I will be putting my hands up and say, within the time frame that we've had, we've not engaged enough with women from communities that have different forms of disability. We have talked to an autistic women's network. We have talked to a number of women with different forms of disability, but I would say there's a lot more to do there. But Samira will certainly tell it like it is from her point of view. So if you're there, Samira, do come off mute, and the floor is yours for 3 to 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Samira. I describe myself as a Mancunian. That's quite important as an identity marker, and being part of my heritage and how I understand my lived experience. Just to say that I've not had direct contact with a lot of the services that this consultation is looking at, but I think that my lived experience of having a disability whereby I am seen as different and the way that I see the world is different. What I mean by that is I have a fluctuating visual impairment and other disabilities that affect mobility, sensory processing issues, and things like that. One of the things that I'd draw your attention to is issues around accessibility, and often that word is used as a synonym for disability, and I think that that's not fair to do that. Accessibility is something that everybody needs, so whether that's in terms of structural accessibility, the way that something is structured, whether that's a website or the way that a physical space is being planned out, or the content of something, how accessible is that, how inclusive is that of the people that it's aimed at. I also happen to be a researcher interested in digital inclusion, and what that has shown me that regardless of doing things digitally, that how we have to work during the pandemic now, or whether we go back to the way that we worked before, is to have the option of both different ways of accessing services, because I think that's quite important. And I'm just going to go on to describe a couple of the barriers that somebody like me who might need access to the services that people are talking about here might face. So issues around making it to a certain physical centre, or the journey of getting out of one's home. So that's a takes a lot of time, energy and resource to get out the door, and that's not factoring in various issues that people might face to make them feel unsafe or compromise their safety and in various ways, whether that's a virus or people around them or toxic environment. And the other barrier I think is really important to think about is trust. So I think that what my lived experience tells me that people often will come and talk to somebody like me and have done about all of these issues that we're thinking about today, and rather than going to like an organization or like a so-called official service. And I think one of the things that I'd ask you to think about is, how do people like me respond to those sorts of confidences and things? Because for me to say to somebody that who discloses their personal experience, sorry, I can't help you, well, that's not the sort of person that I want to be. I want to be able to support them. And one of the other things I do a lot is around patient and public involvement and engagement work, and I'd say that it's important to include that when services are being recommissioned, to build in a certain level of flexibility whereby, say after 6 months, you have the opportunity to think, well, is this really working, or is this something that we can change? So my final thought I want to leave you with is that not everything necessarily costs a lot of money. It could be a small action that you pledge to do as an individual or as a group. And that's it really. Fantastic. Thank you for listening, and thank you for Nicola for inviting me.
No, I'm glad we've finally got you some airtime. I know you do speak and you are on various panels, but I think absolutely a lot of those points you make there are relevant for a number of people, a number of settings, a number of the women who've talked today would certainly back up what you're saying, because I know I've talked to them in a similar vein. So thank you. We've got one more woman with lived experience who's going to share a little bit, something different again. We've got Val Hogan here, who's set up Verve. She'll tell you a bit about that, but more so about some of the mothers and women that she's supporting, if she's here, Val. So if I can ask you to come off mute, if you're with us, Val. Can't see the full participant list.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Oh God, it's a full house. That's never happened ever. We've never had everybody turn up, so thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. My name is Val Hogan. I set up Verve Recruitment after working for an organisation called the National Fostering Agency, who recruit foster carers. I walked away from that organisation because, to me, with my past experiences that I've had in life, it seemed that there had to be a different way of being able to care and support children in care, but more importantly, the women and the families that were looking to care for these children, and the support networks, but also the costs that is involved with it. So I set up Verve to recruit with not-for-profit charities, and my logic behind that is that, one, they provide a lot of services that our local authorities are unable to provide because of austerity, and secondly, that they reinvest every profit, every penny that they make back into the services that they provide. And also the independents charge a huge chunk of money to our local authorities, which in turn affects the amount of budgets that they've got, which in turn then affects also the other services that other ladies that have been discussing prior to this have now gone. So I think it's really addressing where the issues of the impact that this is having, not just on us as women, but on our children, more importantly. I mean, redressing back, I retrained into childcare over 15 years ago. To me, the inequality that we're giving to our children, particularly children in care, when we're seeing that children are being passed around from one foster carer to another, and the same scenario, when I'm doing foster care recruitment, I'm speaking to so many people that apply, and I'm hearing so many life stories, and the one consistent theme that is coming across is lack of clarity of where they can get support. This is particularly true for women, and sorry, I will say women, but people, grandparents. They may have had grandchildren that have been taken into care, and then they don't have access to any social work forums. They basically got nowhere to go. They don't know what their grandparents' rights are. They have children that have been taken out of county lines. You know, they're women that are trying to get SGOs and guardians. Basically, it is that it's postcode lottery. It depends on where you are, because it does seem to be that while I recruit for the whole of the England, it tends to be in areas like the Northwest and Yorkshire, where there's a lot of conflict between local authorities and communication pathways with regards to where their children are. You have children that once they're leaving care at 16, they're slipping through the cracks. There doesn't appear to be any kind of pathway where we're being able to record where they've gone. You know, it's surely that we could look at more supported lodgings providers. We could look at the alternative education. Prior to starting Verve, I actually did do alternative education provisions for young girls, supporting them. I created a theme which was to engage them in childcare as a subject. These were all girls that were in mainstream that were year 9, 10, 11 and in danger of becoming neets. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the actual alternative education system that we put together works better than the mainstream education, because it engaged them to be able to go on and move on further on in life. So they actually went on to become childcare providers, and one young lady is now a nursery manager. I think when we look at the experiences that we've all had in our lives that have led us to where we are now, to the reasons why we're doing what we're doing, is that to me, it is this lack of recording down and lack of passing around and sharing of information from one service to another. I mean, years ago, I had the unfortunate experience of becoming the second person in Rossendale to go on universal credit. And immediately, the barriers that came straight down on you from being employed all your life to then coming into universal credit is toxic. It's very difficult to, if you've never needed to know where these support services are, where you go to, who's going to help you. This is just like, for me as an older woman, what's it going to be like for children? What's it going to be like for people with disabilities? What's it going to be like for people that have come out from prison? People from different cultures who've got no understanding of the language. If there's nobody there that's able to become an advocate, a strong advocate, that can then become an intermediate between maybe social services and keep the clarity on what your pathway is going to be of where you need to be, then we're going to struggle. And I think this is where
I'm just
I'm going
to have to ask. I mean, you've made a couple of really good points there around awareness. It was a key one, and how prevention and working within the education system and supporting people at an earlier age, and bringing some really useful sort of insights around, the barriers that wider family members have when women, go through crisis, potentially have their, children removed, and be that children going into kinship care or children going into care. situations. There's a lot you've covered there. Is there any final ask that you've got? I mean, there are quite a few in there already, but any final point?
Yeah, I mean, the big ask really is regarding is clarity. Is to put systems into place where we know, instead of passing information on from one department to another department to another department, so you don't have this link where you do 3 times and then get kicked out and go back and saying the same old story, because all you're doing is disengaging people with the knowledge that they are just going to give up. When they give up, they go through the cracks. We need to stop that.
Absolutely. No, thank you. That's a good final
and
point.
This is even worse when you've got... No problem.
Brilliant. Thanks, Val. And thanks for I know we've done an interview with you, so there's a lot more that's come out and that will come out through the report to be able to share with things. So we've covered a whole spectrum of observations, views, insights there, and I'm really grateful to everybody for their honesty and for their openness here, and in terms of what you've set a backdrop. Hopefully, you know, unfortunately we can't have everybody come on and give their thoughts and views, but we hope we've given a broad range of food for thought for all of us, not least for the commissioners there. Myself and my colleague Jo are just going to share a few quick thoughts on the survey that we've done, and then we will be going into breakout. I know my internet has some challenges, so I hope you can hear me okay, and I will persevere. So without further ado, we'll get stuck in to this survey stuff. So I'm going to share a bit about just some very quick stuff on the survey, and Jo, I will check in here and there if you want to add in any extra bits, and I'll do a quick kind of summary of the focus groups, and hopefully we'll have all this backdrop and context ready for going into breakouts for a couple of questions to then reflect on this, add our own thoughts and think about some next steps. So survey wise, the 70 surveys have been done so far. The survey is still open. I will be resharing the link in the chat later, and most people on the call have had it through email. Just here on this slide, what you can see is that, and I can't turn my video off because I'm already on wherever I am. I can't physically get it up where I need it. So anyway, for those people, oh, here we go. Yeah, that might work. So we're really pleased in the main, whilst there are gaps, there are some gaps in where we would have liked to have information. The majority of boroughs have contributed in some way. I think there's only Bury and Wigan where we've not had any response from yet through the survey, and we are chasing contacts and people in those areas to have their thoughts and their say. But I am pleased to say, through interviews and through all the focus groups that we've done, women across all 10 boroughs have been involved. So we are getting voices from across the geography. A fairly broad range of ages, although young people and older people, clearly there's more work to do there, and more time to be taken to understand their thoughts and their considerations and what they need. In terms of sort of ethnic background, could do better through the survey. The way it's put together, the fact that there are language barriers, the fact that we've not had resource to translate things or help people translate things, and has been a bit of a barrier. But we've worked with lots of different agencies and individuals to try and make sure we've got as diverse a group as possible completing the survey. Just a few findings. We're not going to labour over this too heavy, and it's a quick, short survey. This isn't academic research by any means, but what we were trying to do with this is reach out to these so-called hidden women. Lots of women who perhaps come through women's centres or coming through the prison system, who are in services, are already somewhat accessible to speak to and to gather feedback. And what we try to do is share this out with people who we know perhaps haven't ever experienced services or perhaps disengaged, and to just try and understand that. So here, although we're looking, have these women really got links to the criminal justice system, or we were somewhat surprised, but also relieved in the context of this work. 52% of the participants who completed the survey have needed police involvement to address one or more of the following. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you know, people who've got personal experience around mental health support needs, around family relationship breakdowns, a whole range of things where people have had you know, substance misuse, and even down to you know, cultural prejudice and immigration difficulties. They've had you know, experience of needing crisis support in these situations, and lots of them have known others. You know, what we were trying to understand is, what's the scale here? You know, what's the scale of what we don't understand? What's the scale of what some of these centres are never going to see and never going to touch, but it's there, and it's all part of providing support for women. It's all part of preventing things happening potentially. And as you'll see, you know, 12% know 5 to 10 people who've had to access police intervention for some of this stuff. 8% know more than 10 people who've needed, you know, police involvement for some of this stuff. And you know, it feels like it's everywhere. And it can feel quite overwhelming from that respect, even beyond, you know, just what's going through the criminal justice system and through the women's centres. There's some stats here on, you know, it's sort of backing up some of what people have said. You know, centres try to do the best they can. The police, I'm sure, try to do the best they can, but significant delays in accessing a wide range of support, not just from the, you know, the police, but from all forms of support that they've tried to access. Be it delays, or be it, you know, in some categories, women who've never got supported, but you know, that leads to other issues. Just so you know, in terms of who's been involved here, just under half have described themselves as having additional health needs. Only 5% had had criminal convictions, but as we said, 52% have needed police intervention for what we explored with them. And about a quarter are single parents who filled in these surveys. We found people have been accessing a range of things. So as you'll see there, from women's centres, you know, to rape crisis support, you know, accessing support through the housing officers, coming to community centres for crisis support. A lot have been accessing counsellors and coaches. We didn't sort of determine it was that self-referred, you know, was it privately paid for? Have you accessed this through your GP? I would imagine it's a range, but at least the women, you know, this gives you a sense of who's filled things in. We're now going to go away and analyse the wider questions around what they've told us is in terms of what works, in terms of what could be improved, and other aspects that we've asked. Here's just a quick snapshot backing up really some of what the women said earlier around what good support looks like. You know, this feeling valued, communication, working well, peer support has come across in focus groups and through the survey as you know, clearly helpful. This non-judgmental and sort of people-centered approach, and really being listened to, you know, building that trust and being listened to. And there's a range of things there, you know, which won't be surprising to people necessarily around what bad support looks like, but it's, you know, the prevalence of that and how it sets people back if they engage with support that does look like bad support. You lose them out of the system for good, you know, as Geraldine highlighted earlier. I'm just going to move my slide on, sorry. So that was the survey stuff. We're not giving you heaps there, that there's more to come within the report, but it just gives you a flavour of some of the hidden, the sort of hidden scale of challenges and themes where people are struggling and struggling to access what they need. This little list here, I will just run through very quickly, but before I do, I was just going to check whether Joe wanted to add anything. I know you've been analysing the survey data and you're due to add things into the report, Joe.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think it's quite a good summary of what you'll see in the report, along with more of a deeper dive in some of these issues. But we did address in the survey the digital and remote support and how useful or how much of a barrier that is. So it's good to hear from Samira before around her views on that. Also, we've asked people around the impact COVID has had on these services. So we'll see more of that in the report too.
Thanks, Joe. Before we go into breakouts, it's just a kind of final summary on the focus groups, really. Just some quick snapshot lines that we've kind of pulled together. So people were saying, you know, and certainly one of the ladies we interviewed was Professor Dawn Edge, who's she's a professor of mental health and inclusivity and academic lead at for diversity and inclusion at the University of Manchester, and she'd certainly be a useful person to help people better understand cultural needs and so forth. But she was really saying, you know, commission with conviction, you know, commissioners, you know, to use their power to change the system and to, you know, implement change as opposed to just deliver services and fund services. Really think about how you can bring innovation into what you're doing. There was across the board, you know, this is about more than money, so much more than money. Commissioners, you know, they will have a pot. The pot, you know, will have to be carved up one way or the other, and people to deliver services will be found. But, you know, the level of influence that commissioners have in raising awareness of the profile of services out there, the influence that they might have in encouraging local authorities to look at their bare minimum or their baseline to create consistency around, you know, what gets invested in women's support and women's services across the 10 boroughs, where it varies greatly from borough to borough. As I've said, this awareness raising and this ability to create tools that are going to be helpful and to work. Again, on the more than money element, what came through time and time again, there just feels like a lack of compassion, a lack of kindness. You know, at a time where 1 minute we're clapping the NHS, and you know we're working with, you know, women who've been through traumatic circumstances. People working in the statutory sector, it came through in particular, whether they're numb to the job, whether they're in the wrong roles, I don't know, but we've heard numerous horror stories, unfortunately, of times when compassion and kindness have just been lacking. And so your expert panel that you develop and may well have a really useful role in improving HR practices. And there's certainly, across those logos that I showed you earlier, and among the people that we've been talking to, numerous experts across the various specialisms who are already delivering fantastic training to help build the knowledge, skills, competencies and expertise of anybody and everybody, particularly including public sector workers, to help improve how support is delivered, be it in women's centres or in prisons or in GP surgeries or in education. So really another nut to crack there alongside this. I talked before about reporting and transparency and tools, so I won't labour on that. There was a real need and a real ask from people to make sure that whilst yes, there are various types of approaches that can be taken, that there mustn't be a dilution of the quality of services and a dilution of providing, you know, intense support to women, you know, at the greatest point of need. And from the women that we spoke to out in communities, specialised support, thematic, tailored support to them, and localised is the preference. I know there's this want for kind of these one-stop shops, but one-stop shops with satellites, or basically ways in which women don't have to put themselves at risk, find the money that they don't have, or put themselves in difficult positions to be able to get somewhere when they're trying to access support was a big part of what people wanted. There was quite a number of conversations around, I don't know if I've termed this right, but, you know, a gendered approach to sentencing. You know, there was, I mean, the commissioners know a lot of women that are going through the prison system are on short sentences, small sentences, and the havoc that can cause, not wanting to, you know, have women go unpunished, you know, when they've committed crimes, you know, that's far from it. But I think there's different ways of approaching this, and certainly a report that came out from the Women's Budget Group just yesterday, I think it was saying, you know, it costs just over £4,000 for a year for a woman to have a place being supported in a women's centre, and it's £52,000 for a place in prison. And so, you know, if it comes down to brass tacks, what they're saying is, you know, we can no longer ignore the business case for reducing you know, the number of women that are going into prison. So something to consider and think about through this recommissioning approach. And last but not least, I mean, you know, over 80 organisations that have been involved in what we've been doing in recent weeks. I think there's a real need to celebrate and recognise and invest in voluntary community sector partners, you know, the agencies and infrastructure support, and really celebrate and recognise and invest in them as experts, you know, be that in the social model, being more therapeutic, or sort of wellbeing models of service delivery. They are ultimately the front door to support, and they're that kind, caring, compassionate face that gets, you know, approached with all sorts, and they need the resources to be able to deal with that, and they've also got the skills to be able to train and consistently train, you know, year on year, the statutory sector to be able to work with, you know, people that are coming through the criminal justice system and wherever else. So in a nutshell, that's where we've got to in a month and a half. We're hoping we're going to get that a little bit further in our breakouts in just a second. I'm just sharing with you the breakout questions here, and I need to check that our breakouts are working in a second. So ultimately, there's two things that we're going to try and do in about 20 to 25 minutes, and I'll put 30 minutes there. That was the ideal. We might get 30 minutes, but I think 20 minutes is realistic. With commissioners in groups, we're going to look at, you know, have you anything to add from what you've heard that will improve support services and overcome barriers? So there's, you know, a short conversation to add to things there. And then because the GMCA are looking at developing a service user advisory panel, or whatever it gets called, we're really interested to hear your thoughts on what the role and function of that could be. So those are the two things we're hoping to cover in breakouts. I'm just going to stop screen sharing and all that jazz, and make sure our breakouts are going to do what they're supposed to. And you can just have a breather for a second. Anything to add, Martin?